Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President Americans for Limited Government. It's December 7th, of infamy that will live, a day that will live in infamy forever. FDR back in 1941, and after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and so it's also the wedding anniversary of a good friend of mine who. When he was getting married, picked the date because he said, "Oh, let's go get bombed." But another story. Back in the old days of lobbyists as an NRA lobbyist, but the it's also a day when we have of introspection to some extent because yesterday Herschel Walker, Heisman Trophy winner and hero in Georgia, ended up losing in a closely fought runoff election. He lost by, he ended up losing, and so we're going to see, this is kind of the last race of a disastrous cycle for the Republicans, who, while they took over the House, they underperformed dramatically, and they did not take over the Senate as they really probably should have. But they met the expectations actually of the establishment class in D.C. I know I was talking to a lot of people who work as lobbyists in town, who are friends and people I know who had no expectation that the Republicans would take the Senate, largely because the map, the number of the races that were up, worked against them. But having said that, there is we deal with what we have, and I want to try to explain it to people. And let me just be clear: the establishment Republican class did not really want to win a majority in the Senate. I think that is almost irrefutable. And let me give you some examples just from the Herschel Walker race. And then I'll go back in time a little bit and show you some other stuff. But I just want to bring this first thing up and show you this little headline. Okay, John Thune, who's the number 2 Republican in the Senate, sat down with Bloomberg reporters last week, and talked about the debt ceiling hike, which is going to be happening, next year, early next year, where we're going to hit the debt ceiling with our national debt. There's going to be a negotiation on how to raise the debt ceiling. There'll be back and forth on what trade-offs have to be gotten to be able to get to 60 votes to raise the debt ceiling. All the while, Wall Street will be saying, the sky is falling, we're going to fall off a fiscal cliff and all this garbage. So we're going to see all that happen in the future. But when you don't have to talk about it, you don't have to talk about it a week before you have a Senate runoff in Georgia, unless you want to have what you say in that discussion with a bunch of reporters, unfriendly reporters, mind you, Bloomberg, unless you want that to be a major issue in that Georgia election. So if John Thune had said, Republicans will be seeking spending caps on new federal spending because we have to get inflation under control, and one of the only ways we can do is stop this spendathon that we're on. If he'd said that, you know what? That's not news. Republicans seeking spending cuts, not news. But no. John Thune made news. John Thune's not new to this game. John Thune's been in Washington for a very long time. John Thune's the person who is in line to replace Mitch McConnell when Mitch McConnell finally goes away. He's the one who's been chosen to be the next majority leader. So John Thune knows what he's doing. He's not, and truthfully, he's from South Dakota. He's a big raw-boned guy. He went to Biola College, Christian University in Orange County, California. And so I'm not in any way impugning his character in this. He knew what he was doing. And what he was doing was putting this issue, debt limit debate eyed by GOP for overhauling Social Security. Oh, they're going to cut. You elect Herschel Walker. First vote he's going to do is cut Social Security. Put the Social Security cut issue which in fact is a lie in itself, but put the whole Social Security instability, Social Security, the fact the argument that Republicans are going to kill Social Security and the fear factor into this election. Now, who does that affect? Affects seniors. Who votes for Republicans? Seniors. Who would say, gee whiz, if the, I don't know, I don't want to vote for my own Social Security to get cut. So who's it have an adverse effect on? Herschel Walker, Republican, who needed every one of those seniors to come out and vote for him. Okay. So that's not simple. This wasn't a mistake. There are no mistakes. Okay. This was not a mistake. This was a choice by John Thune to throw cutting Social Security into the election as an insurance policy to make certain that Herschel Walker did not win. Because Herschel Walker wouldn't have voted for McConnell, wouldn't vote for Thune for being majority leader or minority leader for that matter. So he's not eligible because he wasn't going to vote for the establishment class to continue in power. And hence, they submarined him. What else? What other proof points do I have? Well, let's take a look. Well, first of all, let's see how the Democrats dealt with it. This is what the Democrats put out. Republicans doubled down on threat to crash economy to gut Social Security Medicare. Okay, November 30, 2022, 1 week before the election. Handy, huh? Handy to have your Senate, the number 2 Republican senator, give you that headline, which you can then, of course, he goes after Rick Scott, but the key is you can't make this stuff up. Last night, number 2 Senate GOP leader John Thune made clear that Republicans are so hell-bent on trying to force cuts to programs like Social Security and Medicare, they're willing to tank the economy if they don't get their way. Okay. I don't know about you, but it seems pretty obvious. That's probably not the issue that the campaign managers for Herschel Walker were hoping to have dominate the stage the last week of the election. Guaranteed that wasn't what they wanted. Guaranteed that is exactly what the establishment Republican class did want. Now, let's go on to other fun things. This is an article we're going to go way back in time. This is a December 3. Oh, no, we're not. We're going way back in time to like a couple of days ago. This is a December 3 article. Okay. This is this weekend, past weekend. Republican lieutenant governor in Georgia. Jeff Duncan, who I've never heard of before. He apparently won the election, the Kemp election, and so here he is. He's the lieutenant governor. He says Herschel Walker will probably go down as one of the worst candidates in our party's history. The election was 3 days away. You can say that afterwards, but you don't say it beforehand. And remember, folks, here's the fun part. Republicans have decided, I think incorrectly, to not participate in the mail-in ballot stuff because of concerns about security. And so what Republicans are dependent upon is a large day of election turnout in order to win. That's what they're dependent upon. John Thune and Jeff Duncan could not have engaged in a more aggressive voter suppression campaign if they were the Democrat National Committee. Lieutenant governor, for no reason, pops up and says, oh, worst candidate we've ever had in the history of Georgia. Well, that's the endorsement we want. Yeah, I'm going to run out to the polls and vote for that guy. Did they say Raphael Warnock is the biggest threat to the nation and Joe Biden's presidency is a disaster for this country with long-term ramifications that will that threaten our very survival as a nation? Which they could have said. Nope, didn't say that. Could have said the inflation running rampant based on Raphael Warnock's support for high spending for massive deficit spending and the continued flooding the economy with government money has caused this inflation, is hurting every single family. Could have said that. Didn't say that. Could have said virtually anything. Could talk about guns. Raphael Warnock wants to take it away. Herschel Walker doesn't. Might play pretty well in Georgia, in rural Georgia. You don't want your guns taken away, you better be voting for Herschel Walker getting out to vote. might have been a smart one to go with. Gee, might have. But no, instead, worst candidate in history. And when he gets here, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut Social Security and Medicare. Yay. Any questions out there? I mean, it's pretty obvious. But now let's go to a little bit of stuff that that is a long time ago. It's in 2021, but it sets the stage. And I'm just going to go through this. This is from Politico, which, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of a left. It's a left of center DC rag that a lot of politicians in DC use to float stuff about what's going on. All you need to know is it's presented by BlackRock. But nonetheless, I don't know if it's McConnell is presented by BlackRock or if it's the paper, but apparently somebody's presented by BlackRock. But here's what we have. First, driving the day. This once again was on July 29, 2021. Political Playbook, which is one of those things where it's kind of a tout sheet, and the Politico does. It tells you what's going on politically during for that day, and people around the Hill, Capitol Hill, kind of jockey to get into this thing. So, take Georgia. While Trump is all but begging NFL legend Herschel Walker, this is before Walker gets in the race, to run against the Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock, McConnell views Walker's complicated personal history as a vulnerability. A recent AP story detailed Walker's record of threatening and violent behavior, including once allegedly holding a pistol to his then wife's head and threatening to blow her effing brains out. Walker has spoken openly about having dissociative identity disorder. Josh Holmes, the GOP's leaders, that's McConnell's political right-hand man, McConnell's political right-hand man, tweeted a link to the article. So he spread the article that attacks Herschel Walker, writing, "This is about as comprehensive a takedown as I've ever read, my lord." Well, let me give you a little insight. I will, if there's no way to prove this, but anytime somebody like a Josh Holmes is quoted in an article that attacks somebody who they don't want to be in the get a nomination or something, or get into the Senate, or get elected, or get a post. Anytime they do that, I guarantee you that the person guarantee every political instinct I've had, and being 40 years in this business, tells me that the recent AP story was generated at a McConnell shop, and that Josh Holmes is making sure that people in town read it, so nobody goes on and jumps on the fundraising bus for Herschel Walker. And so he's isolated from the fundraising class, from the establishment class. And McConnell has a better chance of getting somebody he wants to be the nominee. That's how this works. That's how this town works. Nobody wants their fingerprints on anything, but they always do. But they can't resist putting their signature on the thing. And that's what happened right here with Josh Holmes. So he tweeted the article. You want to make sure everybody saw it. So guess what? So the war on anybody who was who Trump was pushing for the Senate this isn't new. This is a 15-month-old, 16, 17-month-old war of the establishment class, no matter what McConnell said going into the election, into this last week, the establishment class actively trying to prevent Herschel Walker from becoming a senator. Now let's go to what McConnell actually said. Okay, this is October 11th. There was a big hit piece on Herschel Walker regarding abortions that he may or may not have paid somebody to get. Okay, and Mitch McConnell gave the ultimate non-endorsement. It's sort of like in Major League Baseball when teams like they're on a road trip. They've started out 20-35 on a year. They're expected to contend for a championship, and the owner of the team says, gives the manager a vote of confidence. I'm giving him a vote of confidence. So McConnell says GOP will, quote unquote, stick with Walker. What He's the nominee. You don't have a choice. But no, he's sticking with Walker. That is his. I think we're going to, I'll just quote it directly. I think we're going to stick with Walker, and all the effort we put in through Senate Leadership Fund, we're going to take it all the way to the end, McConnell told us. CNN in a lengthy interview published Tuesday. So, first of all, just note to McConnell's staff, nobody watches CNN. So your purpose of going on CNN was so the Hill would pick it up. I get it. It's what it's what you do, but nobody actually watches CNN. So, you might as well have him do an interview with the lady who interviewed Obama, who does her podcast from a bath filled with Cheerios or Fruit Loops or something. But anyway, he's we have. It's just every bit of language said, we're doing what we have to do because we have to do it. That's what stick with means. But you know what? We don't want to. Once again, telling everybody else who, if you're going to put money into this race, it's not a great race to put money into. And truthfully, there wasn't a lot of money going in to help him. So let's go and see what the history here. I'm just going to give you one example of the history. In Alabama, when Jeff Sessions was resigned to become the Attorney General, they had a special election. Roy Jones was the I'll just go and Roy Jones is a boxer. Roy Moore was the nominee, Republican nominee, after a long fight of different people being knocked out, and he's running against Doug Jones. And and 3 days before the election, the senior senator of Alabama, who was going to retire, Richard Shelby, a big-time McConnell ally, a guy who switched parties after the 1994 destruction of the Democrats, and switched parties, became a Republican in the House, and then graduated being a senator from Alabama, who's been the Appropriations Committee forever and has been running the appropriations process along with McConnell. That has led to the problems we are having because they keep appropriating the money to fund the left-wing programs. He sides against Trump in Alabama Senate race. Okay, well, this headline is referring to the primary to replace him, but it reminds the first line: the retiring incumbent declined to back Roy Moore against former Senator Doug Jones, helping the Democrat defeat the embattled GOP nominee in bright red Alabama. The weekend before the election, you had Roy Moore against Doug Jones. Doug Jones, a leftist Democrat nominee who never was expected to have a chance. Roy Moore had beleaguered the establishment class, doing things like putting the Ten Commandments up on the Capitol grounds and things like that. It was a real thorn in their side because he kept fighting when on things they didn't want to fight about. So Roy Moore ended up getting pilloried with a bunch of allegations, which didn't turn out to have much to them. But there are a bunch of allegations that allowed the chattering class and the Republican side to say, oh, we can't support Roy Moore. And Shelby, 3 days before the election, said he wasn't voting for Roy Moore, telling every single Republican establishment person that it was okay to not vote for Roy Moore. He didn't endorse Jones. He just said he's not voting for Roy Moore. Roy Moore lost. Republicans went from having presumed 52 seats to 51 seats in the Senate. Fact is, McConnell and the establishment Republicans are as happy in the minority as they are in the majority, as long as they don't have to deal with any more Ted Cruz's and Mike Lee's, who are a thorn in their side, forcing them to do stuff, taking away their power by denying them the capacity, by fighting, by making them deal with issues. And we've seen this time and time and time again over the last 10 years. Just it's a rerun. And Herschel Walker is the latest to be victimized by this. So for me, and I hate to say this, but when they go off and they say it's the candidates, the problem is we don't have quality candidates. Here's the answer to their question. This is a senator from Pennsylvania, a guy who couldn't put sentences together, can't respond to verbal words without it having essentially a teleprompter in front of him. A person who's in favor of releasing first-degree murders on the streets. A guy who is in every way so far out of the mainstream for Pennsylvania that they couldn't afford to have him talk. And conveniently for them, he couldn't. He had a stroke. And he got elected. 2.7 million Pennsylvanians voted for this guy, John Fetterman. You can't tell me it's candidates. It's campaigns. And when you undercut your own campaign because you're not getting your rubber stamp person to come in and vote for you, when you undercut your own campaign, don't expect a lot of people to sit there and feel sorry for you. Don't expect other people to come to the conclusion, if only we listen to Mitch McConnell. No, the problem is Mitch McConnell doesn't actually want to win. He wants to win for Mitch McConnell, and he would argue that I've come to the conclusion that he believes that killing Donald Trump and anybody who supports Donald Trump is more important than having a majority in the Senate and protecting this country from the various challenges we have with an out of control Biden administration. That's where we're really at. That's the real battle. McConnell's pitching it. The bottom line is we got to start playing in that playing field too. I'm going to give you one more here. There's no need. It belabors the point. So what do we do about it? Well, first and foremost, I'll tell you what we're trying to do about it. In the past election, we were working with some other group, with at least one other group, putting a network together and running a limited reach ads that were over the internet targeting low propensity Trump voters. Why does that matter? Well, a study came out just that we published yesterday, I believe, maybe it was the day before. And it was a study which showed that in Arizona, the biggest problem that Kerry Lake and the Republicans who were running had was, while there was a lot of corruption in Maricopa County, we just looked at the numbers, and without the corruption, just looked at the numbers. You know where there was a lower turnout in Arizona? It was in the rural counties. There were heavy Trump supporting counties where in those heavy Trump supporting counties, the Kerry Lake got fewer votes from of the percentage of people who voted in those Trump supporting counties than Donald Trump did as a percentage. You know, Katie Hobbs ran even with Biden's numbers. Why would that be? Well, if you're talking about low propensity voters, you got to get the low propensity voters, means they're not inclined to vote. They might not even know the elections exist in the midterm. They certainly don't. They vote in presidential elections and presidential elections only. And quite possibly they have only voted for Donald Trump as maybe the only person they ever voted for in their entire life. And it doesn't matter if you're on every conservative outlet saying, talking about being supported by Donald Trump. It does not matter because they are not watching that. unless you directly communicate with people who are low propensity voters, you establish a relationship, you knock on their door, you help them vote, you make sure they vote, you help them do everything possible to make sure they vote. You inform them, you activate them. You have to do that. If you don't do that, what happens is very simple. They don't vote. They don't vote. So, and the Republican establishment and the consulting class is the consulting class. They run a standard campaign, and they don't really want these people to vote because they don't like them very much. So, and Carrie Lake did. Carrie Lake was a great candidate. And she may have well gotten it stolen from her in Maricopa County. That's not the point here. The point is she underperformed in areas she should have overperformed. And that's a result, and that is a function of campaign. It's not a function of anything else. It's a function of campaign. I'm going to devolve here, and I'm going to tell you a story. This happened in North Carolina, 2016. Americans for Limited Government was leading an effort to turn out low propensity Trump voters in North Carolina, 2016. When I went to get the voter files from the people, I was told, these are who you got to get the voter files from. I was told, no, you can't get people who are only voted once or twice in the last 5 elections. That's not who we're targeting. I said, but it's who we're targeting. So no, the state party doesn't want those people targeted, and we're not going to sell. They're a bigger client, and we're not going to sell you those voter files. After going back and forth and fighting with them, finally we negotiated as a slight compromise, got partially what we wanted. By the way, the guy who was telling me that ended up in the Trump administration, even though he was doing everything he could to block Trump winning in North Carolina. So what happens? So we went and we did our campaign, but we did a digital campaign on the other side. Our campaign was, we were knocking on doors, we were talking to people, we're as a standard get out the vote campaign, targeting low propensity, independent, Democrat, and Republican voters to get them out to vote. And so we went the lowest end of that scale that they give us and sorted it, and we knocked on those doors, and we did everything we could to get people something in their hand, and we had an overwhelmingly positive response. But yeah, I'm voting for Trump. Okay. We also then did a digital campaign where we put ads on about, I guess, 500,000 people who we separately identified as low propensity probable Trump voters, who the state party didn't want to come out to vote. Okay, particularly the guy who's running for governor didn't want them to come out to vote. Actually, primarily Richard Burr, who was on the ballot, who is a retiring senator, retired this time, was the one who didn't want them to come out to vote. They weren't his kind of people. So we did a digital campaign. We ran an ad on digital that was a get out the vote ad. And it was a pretty compelling ad. And I wish I'd queued it up for this broadcast, but I didn't. And it basically was, you tired of people with loafers kicking sand in your face? Get up and vote. Show them who's got the power. Don't let them push you around anymore. Don't let them send your jobs overseas anymore. Stand up and fight for yourself, because these guys aren't going to fight for you. They hate you. So we ran an ad that was pretty compelling, and it was effective. We kept a number of the people who we would have, a small number of the people who we would have reached out to. We kept them separate. We kept them as a control group. We wanted to see, did this work? Did it not work? And what we discovered was we increased turnout by about 10% over the control group, simply by running the digital ads. Because the control group would have received the digital ads. They received every other input from the rest of the campaign and the turnout. And so the turnout was the turnout. And the differential, and based on polling, the people who we were getting to go out, exit polls showed they voted 70-30 for Trump. So the net vote for Trump that was generated by that campaign was in excess of the number of votes he won by. That's what happens when you actually go after low propensity voters who are on your side and you fight for them, you give them a choice and you empower them, you win. We had a dramatically reduced version of that campaign running in a number of states this year, but we never could fund the entirety of the campaign. And the closing argument is always the important thing, and we were dramatically diminished in how many people we could reach based on money. It cost money to do it. That's not going to happen in 2024. I'll be damned if I'm going to let that happen in 2024. We're going to fight like crazy to raise the money to be able to have 2 years of advocacy at people who currently are seeing their country torn away from them, don't know what to do, maybe feel helpless. And some say, well, the vote doesn't matter. It was all stolen from us. We are going to make certain that those people are energized. And we're going to call on you guys to help us do that as this evolves. But it's a matter of raising millions of dollars to do that because it's expensive. But you know what's really expensive? If we don't. And I'm not talking inflation. I'm not talking taxes. All those things will get impacted. I'm talking about freedom. And we may lose future elections. The American public may not agree, may not have a taste for being free anymore. Maybe what COVID really killed was our desire to be a free nation, desire to be free individuals. But I'll be damned if we're going to lose because a bunch of the consultant class doesn't like blue collar Americans coming out to vote. And we're going to fight like crazy to make sure that happens. And because we have to win this battle for freedom. It is the battle of our generation, and we're going to do everything we can to do it. So that's why I went down the Herschel Walker path. I want to show you what happened, how it was undermined, and tell you that there is a solution. The solution is not to be dependent on Mitch McConnell, okay? Not to be dependent upon the consulting class, not to be dependent upon people who make a living by placing ads that were innovative in the 1980s and collecting their commission for doing it. We're just not going to we can't allow ourselves to be dependent upon them. Our country's too important to do that. And the bottom line is now, while we're doing this reevaluation, now's the time when we're going to be going into those people who are big funders and who are saying what went wrong. And the answer to the left of the establishment classes, we had bad candidates. We needed better candidates in the primaries. And the answer to that, once again, is very simple answer that anybody can get. John Fetterman, worst candidate in history, ended up becoming a senator. And with that face looking at you as the future of the next 2 years, I'm going to let you go and just appreciate all you do. Hold on. I promised I would take I'd take a couple of these. Let's see. I believe both parties are going to screw us. Let's find out. One of the things, Rick, you can look at is right now there's a fight between whether or not there's going to be a 12-month CR or a 9-month CR, continuing resolution, to fund the Democrat priorities for the next 9 months. Or is there going to be an omnibus that would also fund the Democrat priorities for the next 9 months? Or are they going to have a short-term continuing resolution to February or March, where the Republican chairs in the House will have a chance to put their imprint on what the budget, what we're going to be spending for until the end of the year, and have that fight in February, March between the Republicans in the Senate, in the House, and the Democrats in the Senate, knowing that the Democrats in the Senate need to get to 60, meaning if they've got 51 now, so they'll need 9 Republican votes in order to pass a funding bill. So as long as the Republicans hang together in the Senate and the Republicans hang together in the House, they'll have the ability to reshape, at least partially, the funding in this country, and we'll be able to do something about the 87,000 IRS agents that have been funded by the Democrats, and which somehow Mitch McConnell never talked about, and John Thune didn't talk about. He didn't talk about stopping 87,000 immigration or IRS agents. He talked about cutting Social Security. What a moron. I mean, just trust me. That's not a mistake. He's not a moron. That wasn't a mistake. Let's look at the next one. There's only one thing I can say about the Democrats is they stick together. They don't break ranks. I'm a Republican. I'm ashamed of the party. Let Herschel down at the top of the party. Yep. 100%. What you say is, Jimmy, it's the single biggest lesson that I've learned out of this. I thought it would be impossible for the Democrats to hold their majority together with only a 5-vote majority. Pelosi managed to pull it off, and she pulled it off because essentially, whether a Democrat runs as a conservative Democrat, moderate Democrat, or liberal Democrat, they're all socialists. And so, given the fact you've chosen to become part of the Socialist Party under the guise of Democrats, you're going to be, you might have to position yourself differently in district. But when an Abigail Spanberger, who ran for a Northern Virginia seat that was a toss-up, when she kept running and saying, "Oh, I'm a conservative," and tried to run as a conservative, and she voted with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. Bottom line is she voted for Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. Every time Nancy Pelosi needed her, she voted with her. They stick together, and our leadership is more interested in their internal battles than they are in winning and saving the country. Just a sad truth. By the way, that's true on both sides. We're having a big internal battle over who's going to be speaker, and that could cost us, the Republicans, cost people for limited government dearly. And so it's not, we're a party in name only in many ways. Let's talk about Carol. Democrats have more money, I guess. It's unbelievable how this is happening to our country. Democrats have a huge amount of money advantage. When I was first running political campaigns back in the 1980s, my boss, the political consultant boss, said to me when I was complaining because I couldn't get anything done with the LA Times. They were just killing us. And I was really frustrated. And I complained to the consultant, a guy named George Young, great guy. And George told me something I've never forgotten. I'm going to share it with you now. He said, "Listen, the Democrats have the media. We have the money, and it's up to us to use that money effectively so we overcome the media." Well, today, the Democrats have the media, and they have the money, and it's up to us to use our grassroots and the few media outlets and sources we have, like this one, to organize effectively and beat them. It's really hard to overcome both media and money, and that's what we're trying to do. And the way we're going to do it is through grassroots. We're going to clobber these clobber these guys by simply changing the chessboard, by putting more pieces on the chessboard that they're not planning on. We're not going to play the game the way that the Republicans have played it, because the way they've been playing it is the losing game. And we're going to play it where we're going to bring more pieces on the chessboard, and we're going to drive voters to the polls in a way that nobody's ever seen before. And it is going to be, we're going to win or we're going to lose. But we'd be stupid to do the same thing we've done the last 2 election cycles last 3 election cycles and think it's going to be a winner, because it isn't. We have to change the game and change the way we play it. And with that, I'm going to leave, and just know, for those of you who are still with us and are a little depressed, God's in control. We don't get to call the ball. We just have to do what we're supposed to do. But there are very few callings as high as fighting for your country, and you don't always win. We had it in 1776 in Valley Forge. You had a bitterly cold winter. You had a shortage of food. You had substandard housing by every imagined way. Many of the troops didn't have boots, and they were all scheduled to be decommissioned on January 1, 1776, and leave, and effectively ending Washington's army. George Washington managed to rally those troops and keep them in the army. And he did it through a couple of things. First of all, the crossing of the Delaware, that famous picture, and routing the Hessians in Trenton was designed. He did it, bold move. He did it because it gave hope to his troops. Well, folks, I hope that while we're being real about what's going on, you also have hope, because there's a lot of things to be hopeful about. America still is the strongest country in the world. People are trying to undermine from within and without, but we're still the strongest country in the world. And the proof is that right now, with all the economic troubles, both here and abroad, you know where foreign investors are putting their money? They're putting it into the US dollar. That's why we have the strongest dollar in history right now, because around the world, they look around and say, the United States is the only hope for the world. And people can say whatever they want, but how they use their money tells you an awful lot. And that tells you what the rest of the world thinks. They think America is the strongest country in the world and is the last great hope for the world. So let's live up to that. Let's live up to that. For that, I bid you adieu. I will talk to you again either tomorrow or Friday. Take care.